Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for some guided meditation as well as a Dhamma talk from Ayya Soma. So tonight we have joining us a couple of friends so far. Ron, Kaw's our friend, Adine, as well as Elaine, Melinda, Ayya Vimalanyani. Thanks for joining, Venerable. Alexandra and Rosalinda, and some other friends who are watching but not typing in. So tonight, Ayya Soma will start us off with some meditation and then share some words of Dhamma. And if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them in and we'll address them at the end of the talk. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Ayya for tonight's session.
Thank you, Bhante Sono, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Venerable Vimalanyani, for tuning in. It's always intimidating having other monastics watch, but I'll pretend that I'm all right. Fake it till you make it. So we can get into a comfortable position. And just perhaps rock your body from side to side, making sure that the back is nice and straight. And when you're ready, you can close your eyes. You can start relaxing the entire body from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. Relaxing the forehead. Relaxing the cheeks, the jaw, the throat, relaxing the shoulders, the arms, the chest, the belly, relaxing the legs and feet, relaxing the entire body. And we can slowly bring our attention to the breath. Lifting it up, perhaps to the tip of the nose, by the nostrils. Or perhaps keeping it a little bit more of a wide angle. Watching every in-breath and out-breath. Watching the breath with a knowing mind, not with a judging mind. not wanting for the breath to be any different than what it's like. We just observe the process of breathing. When we're breathing in, we know that we're breathing in. When we're breathing out, we know that we're breathing out. Actively cultivating an interest for the breath. We make sure we're present in every moment, knowing if the breath is fast, long or short, or slow. Whatever it's like, it's okay. All we need to do is observe it, learn from it. If thoughts about the future or about the past appear in the mind, we don't need to be bothered by them. We can just treat them like clouds in the sky. They will arise and cease on their own. No need to intervene. We can just keep our attention to the breath. Is the breath subtle? Is the breath coarse? Is it long? Is it short? What is it like? And as we keep holding our attention to the breath, we can see how the mind becomes more and more peaceful. And as the mind becomes more and more peaceful, we see how the body and mind become more and more relaxed. And as we become more relaxed and peaceful, the mind becomes more and more happy. And we can contemplate how this happiness is always accessible to us. If only we put the conditions in place. So we can wish for ourselves to always be happy, always be peaceful, always be safe, always be healthy. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering, free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be free from suffering. May I swiftly attain Nibbana for the benefit of all beings. And we can extend this wish to all the beings present in the room or online who have come to meditate with us. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they be free from suffering. May they be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be safe. May they be free from suffering, free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May they swiftly attain awakening for the benefit of all beings. Growing and expanding our hearts, extending this wish to all sentient beings, humans and non-humans, in this world and in other worlds. May all beings have happy minds. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. May all beings swiftly attain awakening. You can open your eyes and stretch a little bit if you need to. Drink some water.
So thank you, Ayya Soma, for guiding us in that meditation. And welcome to some more friends joining in on YouTube as well as on Facebook. So Saring, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Patrika, Patricia, Steve Lynn, Linda, Denise, Aura, Yeo, Michael. And Ayya Vimalanyani says, don't be intimidated, you're doing great. Heart emoji. And Elaine says, anyone else hold the handrail when using the stairs today?
For those who don't get the joke, they should watch Bhante Sudaso's talk from this morning. It's on YouTube.
And Denise says that she actually missed a step going up the stairs this morning and almost fell and thought about this morning's talk.
And we're laughing. Buddhist humor.
And Mark on YouTube also says hello. So thanks everyone for joining us. At this time, I'll pass things over to Ayya Soma for tonight's Dhamma talk.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for meditating together. I'm still blissed out from metta meditation. It's always great. I don't know why I don't do it 24/7. So we can start this evening by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So today was a very beautiful day, actually, here in New Jersey. And after our Dhamma talk, starting the day with the Dhamma talk from Bhante Sudaso, that instilled a bit of sense of urgency in us, since it's always a good reminder to contemplate death. In the afternoon, we went to do a silent walking meditation here at the reservation in West Orange, New Jersey. And a group of lay friends joined us, and at the end, one of these lay friends, it was her first time doing walking meditation, or actually doing any meditation of any sort. And she wanted to share how she normally suffers a lot of anxiety, and this was the first time that she could take a break from her mind and experience some happiness. And it was such a beautiful gift to hear. As monastics, we don't have, well, anything really to share. But at the same time, we have the most beautiful gift to share, which is the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings of liberation, the most precious gift, the gift that was given to me, was shared to me several years ago by different monastics, and that these days I'm also in the position of trying my best to also share this gift. And it's just so beautiful to see the release from suffering, even if for a short while, in anyone, and other people, and in ourselves as well. And the suttas are so full of so many incredible stories of awakening, but they're also full of so many stories of struggle. And I wanted to share actually tonight a little excerpt from the Bhikkhu Samyutta, where, in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, all the bhikkhunis are very, very enlightened, or fully enlightened. So, you kind of read it. It's both inspiring, but at the same time, a little intimidating, because you're like, wow, not quite there yet. Mara comes in meditation and starts telling them all sorts of things. And a lot of them can be actually quite upsetting too, or quite interesting according to the case. And so when we see the reactions of the bhikkhunis, we're both in awe that this path is possible, but at the same time, we're like, wow, so much work to do, so much greed, hatred, and delusion in my mind. But then you go to the Bhikkhu Samyutta, and it's actually a lot more, relatable if you're unenlightened, because the bhikkhus in that particular section, particular part of the canon, they're all struggling in their path towards awakening. And in this particular sutta that I'm about to share, there's one of the monks that is full of unwholesome thoughts. He goes on alms rounds, and there's lots of greed, hatred, and delusion happening in his mind. And then he goes into the forest, and at a certain point, a deva, out of compassion, goes up to him because she sees, or they see that, I don't know if this deva was female or male or or anything, so it's not really important. So the deva sees the bhikkhu, and out of compassion goes and shares some verses. And the deva says, "Because of attending carelessly, you, sir, are eaten by your thoughts." I love this beautiful translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Eaten by your thoughts. How relatable is that? Right? Whenever we start sitting in meditation, and we're like, oh, these are very simple instructions. Breathe in, breathe out, just pay attention. And all of a sudden, we are devoured, not eaten, devoured by thoughts. And so the deva shares, because of attending carelessly, and that means, not putting any sort of restraint as you go about your day. So restraining all our senses, but instead letting them loose. This is the consequence. You're eaten by your thoughts. Yet, having relinquished the careless way, you should reflect carefully. By basing your thoughts on the teacher, the Dhamma, Sangha, and your own virtues, you will surely attain to gladness and rapture and happiness as well. Then when you are suffused with gladness, you'll make an end to suffering. I just got goosebumps. Lots of Dhamma Sukha. It's such beautiful verses, but also quite unusual in the way, not for the canon, not for the words of the canon, but unusual in the sense of sometimes these days when we go, or when we used to before the pandemic, when we used to go to meditation retreats, etc. Most often than not, we have very particular meditation instructions that are given in order to work with our restless mind, or to work with this mind devoured by thoughts, right? And they're all well and good, and of course one should follow that advice. But I love how here the deva does not address any sort of realm of meditation practice, but instead the instructions that the deva gives are about recollecting Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and recollecting one's own virtues. And I particularly love it because I actually followed this instruction, but I followed it only, it took me about 4 years to follow it. For 4 years I spent, I was just doing all the different, meditation instructions, like mantras, like what Bhante Sudazo kindly offered as a suggestion. Focus, 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 focus. It works, it's great. Or just keeping on, focusing on mindfulness of breathing, or on the element of tranquility, just paying attention and growing it, but never really worked so well as contemplating Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and then recollecting my own virtue. And in particular, I had done this in the past, but in particular, actually, I did this practice for an extensive period of time, this past winter retreat. We went on silent retreat for 2 months. And I was spending hours of recollecting how magnificent the Buddha is and how incredible the Dhamma is, that it's not something that requires blind belief, but you can actually invites you in, that you can experience it for yourself and immediately have that experience, that taste of liberation, kind of like what we just experienced with metta meditation. Who could have ever thought that the mind is so capable, it's capable of creating such happiness by itself? Just if we learn what kind of conditions to put in place. And then recollecting the Sangha, how for, the past 2,500 years, but really, without discoverable beginning, with all the different Buddhas that have come to the world and the different followers of the Buddhas in the past who have followed, these teachings and have attained full, complete liberation and stopped being devoured by these thoughts, stopped being, burnt by greed, hatred, and delusion. And so naturally, just by contemplating this and then looking also at the incredible good things that we do, and if we are actually here and doing this practice, odds are that we're a fairly good person. Even the worst Buddhist practitioner is still like I would say on the on the really good spectrum, when one thinks about sort of the world. So there are so many good things that we do on a regular basis. And when we start recollecting them instead of recollecting our drawbacks, then naturally the mind starts becoming more elated. And this rapture or euphoria, as Bhante Sudazo likes to describe it, then naturally leads to happiness. And we see how then this path is not actually about just struggling with our greed, hatred, and delusion, because the more we go further, we become more and more aware of it. And from, a little tiny sort of like a bunch of sand, we start realizing that actually the bunch of sand is just a part of like this gigantic mountain that we don't see the end of it, the tip of it. It's like a huge Himalaya. We become overwhelmed. So much dukkha, so much suffering, almost more suffering than how we started, because we dispelled the delusion that was keeping us from seeing that big mountain. But instead, if we start recollecting our capacity for awakening, the incredible compassion of the Buddha, the incredible qualities of the Buddha, who fully understands this world and other worlds, fully understands his mind and other minds, perfect teacher who knows just exactly what to say at the right time, worthy of offerings, the stainless mind. And we start also recollecting that we have that capacity. We just need to practice his teachings. It's great. Just by saying it, I'm like, oh, yay. That's wonderful. Right? The mind starts opening up by itself. And so we have to always recollect that fundamentally the teachings of the Buddha are teachings of dependent origination. So that everything is the product of causes and conditions. So by observing the mind, understanding the mind, we can see cause and consequence. And so we see that by going around unmindlessly and cultivating all sorts of thoughts that appear in the mind. So I hate this, I don't like this, I want it to stop, or that's great, oh, that's good, oh, I hope that I'm going to have that for lunch, or look at that person, very good looking, and oh, I would like that dress or that other dress. Well, clearly it's not, that doesn't appear in my mind, because it's either this dress or this dress. See? Also so compassionate, the Buddha, that eliminated some causes of suffering for us monastics, kept it simple. But yeah, so like by putting, certain conditions in place, then we have a natural consequence. And we see also how, from what the Deva also shares, the important role that faith plays in all of this. And how often, especially if we're convert Buddhists, we overlook this component of faith. Perhaps we like the Buddha, we like the Dhamma, maybe we're okay with the Sangha, but we don't really invest that much time, or enough time anyway, in cultivating this incredible sense of preciousness of the triple gem. And it's called the triple gem for a reason. Not the triple three things, the triple things in Buddhism, but the triple gem, something extremely precious. And what do you do with something extremely precious? You don't treat it as like some plastic that you put in a drawer, but rather you want to make sure that it's protected. You want to make sure that it's safe. You want to make sure that it's polished. But getting back to the conditions, to creating the conditions, I wanted to share also how this passage of dependent origination is actually highlighted in the Nidana Samyutta. And so I'm going to paraphrase it, and only just a part of the links, but related to what we're talking about. And fundamentally recollecting what is the purpose here that we're trying to do. So eliminating suffering. And in order to eliminate suffering, we want to cultivate an understanding of things, how they really are. So in the Nidana Samyutta, there is this connection between knowledge and vision of things as they are. The Buddha says the proximate cause of that is concentration, so oneness of mind. And the proximate cause for concentration is happiness. And what is the proximate cause for happiness? It's tranquility. And what is the proximate cause for tranquility? It's rapture. Or euphoria, as Bhante Sudatta likes to say. And what is the proximate cause for rapture? It's gladness. And what is the proximate cause for gladness? It's faith. And interestingly, enough. The proximate cause for faith is suffering. So we all have to start somewhere, right? And we start with our experience of suffering, of understanding that samsara is actually pretty bad. It's really not that great. You know, we can obsess over and over with the pleasant of samsara, the pleasantness. And we can spend a lot of time really dwelling in the what we perceive as pleasant. But sooner or later, we'll have to face how ultimately none of this is satisfying. Ultimately, there is suffering. Ultimately, we cannot escape old age, sickness, and health, and death. Sorry. We can escape health, unfortunately. Actually, like we are automatically past 5 days after, I spent in almost entirely in bed because I was extremely sick. So, yeah. Can't escape sickness. I'm very attached to health. So that was like a very interesting teaching over and over again. But yeah, so this sense of suffering then actually creates the conditions for faith to arise. And the biggest benefits of faith are of cultivating faith actually, are to eliminate one of the biggest hindrances, the hindrances of doubt. You know, it's kind of like, actually today, without getting too far-fetched with sort of metaphors, but you know, with the pandemic, for example, the entire world is currently a disaster. And for the first time, actually, in history, in recorded history, we have a vaccine that has been created in, like so short, so like a solution. Yet we see how when doubt starts happening in the mind of people, actually even before the vaccine, even when it was wear a mask, for example, doubt for it to work, then we actually don't take advantage of what is out there and we perpetuate the suffering. So we're like, I really want to get out of suffering. When is this pandemic going to end? But I don't believe in masks and I don't believe in vaccines and I don't believe in this and I don't believe in that. And it keeps going. So in the same way, that's kind of like how we go about life when there is, you know, this lack of trust in the Buddha, this lack of respect in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha. And if we don't nurture that, then we will never take things, the teachings, as working hypothesis. We will never actually give it really a shot. Pun, it was not intended, but but it kind of came into being. And you know, that can create such a sort of barrenness of mind. Actually, I believe the translation that is used, right, to define that sort of state of being. And I wanted to share, you know, there are different ways, of course, to challenge, to alter this. But definitely, like, an important way to do it is to really embrace the teachings of the Buddha and really embrace the teachings on virtue. Because that is the first actual experience of happiness that we're going to have, that is very, very accessible and that builds sort of creates the conditions for then our sort of more spiritual practice, spiritual elation to build, to generate, and to move us forward. And of course, we see in traditional Asian Buddhism how that is built in. You know, the reason why us monastics, why we take these vows, they're very impractical. And not for what people normally think, you know, like celibacy or what is it that, I don't know, people are very obsessed normally with celibacy, which is, oh, dinner, yeah, not eating afternoon, yeah, that's a big thing. Anyway, there are these precepts that people normally, it's at least my friends from my previous life within this life, they're like, oh, how can you do that? Wow, that must be crazy. And I'm like, no, actually, that's completely fine. But, you know, for example, not handling money is really unpractical. Sometimes, you know, if there's not a lay person around and we need to, you know, something needs to get done or we need to go from one place to another, then you have to accommodate this poor lay person who has to come here, and then you have to spend like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours just to organize for the poor lay person to come here. Poor. This is how we kind of like, as Westerners, think about it. We're like, oh, so impractical, so impractical. When I could have done this in 2 seconds, like swipe the card, done, transaction. Or driving. Well, I don't drive, so actually for me that's practical. But for those who drive, that's also a similar thing, you know. Monastics who all of a sudden, doesn't matter whether they drive or not, and so an errand needs to be done. You have to ask all these volunteers and see what time, and then arrange and coordinate. It's impractical. So why do we do this, actually? I really asked myself, because being someone who was very, you know, agnostic / atheist, I wasn't particularly keen in like taking precepts or doing any sort of rituals that just for the sake of it. You know, I have to really understand why I'm doing whatever I'm doing. Otherwise, I won't do it. I'm also Italian. We're not very fond of rules. So all these causes and conditions created the causes for investigating. So why do we do these things? And we do these things in order to create the opportunities for ourselves and others to practice and make merit and cultivate generosity and cultivate these beautiful ornaments of mind, as the Buddha says. And these are just as important as watching your breath in sitting meditation, if not more important, because without all of this, good luck with watching your breath in meditation. There is a reason why, for when we were running the retreat center in Rockaway, I was noticing how there were, you know, these people who had meditated for 20 years, 30 years would come. They couldn't, a lot of times they couldn't even like sit still for longer than half an hour. And then I remember our friend May, Asian Buddhist from Burma, arrives. She hadn't meditated for 13 years. She sits down, pum, 3 hours straight, like a rock. I was like, wow, it's impressive. This girl must have some really incredible past karma. And then, well, another friend from Thailand came, same thing. Another friend from Indonesia also never meditated, you know, all these rocks. And I was like, how is this possible? I visited this Vietnamese monastery once. Similarly there, 70-year-old woman had just ordained. She had just started meditating like a rock, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. It hurts. It's painful. So how is it possible? Well, because actually they had been meditating. They had been practicing. They had been creating all those conditions in order for happiness to arise in the mind. And then the happy mind is easily concentrated. And so this passage from Anguttara Nikaya 5.176 is very on point, I think, on what we're talking about. And the Buddha says, householders. So it's directed to householders, not to monks. So you have no excuses. Householders, you have presented robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick to the Sangha of bhikkhus. So the Buddha starts by saying, this is a really good, meritorious deed. How wonderful that you have created all this merit. And he proceeds, you should not be content merely with this much. Thinking, we have presented robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick to the Sangha of bhikkhus. Therefore, householders, you should train yourselves thus. How can we, from time to time, enter and dwell in the rapture of solitude? So in other words, the Buddha is saying, do not settle on just making merit, but go further. And this is what happened in all the friends that I was telling you about, born Buddhists who had practiced in this way, offering so many things to the Sangha since they were born, literally since they were born. So cute. We have so many kids that come here at Empty Cloud Monastery and they can't even balance on their feet, and the parents just put their hands in Anjali and teach them generosity. So it's ingrained, it's embedded, you know. We have a bit of, as converts, we have some time to catch up. But yeah, so in this occasion, once we create these conditions, then the Buddha says, well, then the time is right. Do not be content, do not settle. In fact, actually, we should always take as Buddhism as being this ambitious practice, very ambitious practice of working with the mind and going further, not settling, not being happy with what we want, not being happy with what we've got, not settling, but always going further. And we see that here the Buddha says, the rapture of solitude. And so there is, of course, as we've mentioned, also that elation that comes with giving. And that elation that comes, also there is actually, the Buddha says that there are different types of rapture. There is a rapture that comes from sensual pleasures. So the Buddha likes to keep it real. So he's like, it's not that actually, sensual pleasure, it's terrible. If sensual pleasure were 100% terrible, then nobody would be interested in it. As a matter of fact, we are born, as humans, we're born in a realm that is full of sensual pleasure. I was born in Italy. We've mastered some things here in Samsara, I gotta say, like incredible food, incredible architecture, incredible scenery. Yeah, it's pretty pleasant. Now that I don't live there anymore, I really appreciate all of that. But when I was living there, I did not, because it was not satisfying, not fully satisfying. So we see that carnal rapture that we get when we are, watching a beautiful panorama, or I don't know how you say it in English, landscape, or having pleasant food, etc. There is such a thing as, carnal euphoria. And that's pretty much every single human being has experienced that to one degree or another. And then the Buddha says that there is spiritual rapture, which is basically the rapture that we experience, especially in first and second jhana. So the rapture based on seclusion and the rapture based on concentration. But then he says that there is something even further. But I don't know, what is that? And he says the rapture more spiritual than the spiritual. That is how Venerable Body translated it, actually. And it's basically when one who is fully liberated reviews the mind, liberated from greed, hatred, and delusion. So we have a bit of way to go there, but every now and then we can actually still do that practice in hindsight. We can see the amount of greed, hatred, and delusion that we have discarded. And actually, we have a bit of taste of the future. And also an encouragement. We can also go like, oh, okay, actually, you're not that terrible, Ayya Soma. If you remember the amount of hatred that you had 6 years ago, yeah, it's a lot of sweeping that has been done. The amount of greed, actually, I've done a lot of progress with greed. Yeah, wow, pretty good. And the amount of delusion, actually, because I totally remember how I had no idea 6 years ago that I had all that greed and hatred in my mind to begin with. So, well done, well done. So yeah, we can have a bit of a taste of this rapture, more spiritual than the spiritual. And so we see how the Buddha, once again, has encouraged in the sutta before to cultivate, taking the time to enter and dwell in the rapture of solitude. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and in a way that perhaps is not the usual emphasis. So not necessarily the meditation, the formal meditation side of it, but rather I wanted to emphasize the rapture that can come from seclusion. So from being blocking off the hindrances, but not necessarily as we are meditating. And I'll read from Anguttara Nikaya 526, where the Buddha gives some instructions. In whatever way the bhikkhu recites the Dhamma in detail as he has heard it and learned it, in just that way, in relation to that Dhamma, he experiences inspiration in the meaning and inspiration in the Dhamma. As he does so, joy arises in him. When he is joyful, rapture arises. For one who is rapturous, for one with a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. One tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated. This is the third basis of liberation, by means of which, if a bhikkhu dwells heedful, ardent, and resolute, his unliberated mind is liberated, his undestroyed taints are utterly destroyed, and he reaches the as yet unreached, unsurpassed security from bondage. So in other words, contemplating the Dhamma. Really holding it as if it was a vital concern. So listening to the words of the Buddha. And in that moment, we're actually free from the hindrances. We're constantly devoured by the hindrances, right? Where there's this sort of, there's no sense of, there's no shelter sometimes from the hindrances. But actually, there is. We can see for ourselves what it feels like. It's actually pretty accessible. And it's by contemplating the Dhamma, contemplating the words of the Buddha, fully being there, present. As if it was a matter of life or death, because it is. It actually is. We could die in this moment. Could die on the stairs, as we were saying earlier. walking up and down the stairs, very dangerous. So this is our opportunity right now to understand the teachings and penetrate them and perforate them. And overcome what we were saying earlier, that barrenness of mind, that incredible distress that can come with doubt. One of my favorite suttas actually is the sutta of Channa, the charioteer, who was this monk who at a certain point was given the silent treatment from the other monastics, because he was full of arrogance. He was not listening. He was not listening to the other monks when they were admonishing him. And it's so beautiful. There's this sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where he's at a certain point, reflecting, well, I too understand, like the other monks, that everything is impermanent, the suffering and not self, but why am I not like liberated like the other monks? And what's wrong with me? Like there's something that is really not right. And in that moment, when he understands that he actually doesn't really understand, because otherwise he would be fully enlightened, he actually decides to go to Venerable Ananda and ask for advice. So I think it was last week, we were reading that sutta where is the good opportunity, when is the good opportunity to go to a monk and ask them questions. And that was a good opportunity, like Channa did, when we don't know, when we're stuck in the path, when we have a Dhamma question and we need someone who's ahead of us in the path to shed light. And that is actually a moment of growth, a great opportunity to address, to meet with a monk, but also a great opportunity of growth for us, that we even have that realization. And so when he goes to Venerable Ananda, there is a further breaking point in Channa's story, because Ananda realizes that since Channa is actually asking a question, he's now ready to learn. He's now ready to understand, not on an intellectual basis like he was before. So we all, understand, yeah, there's suffering, well, clearly. And I understand everything is impermanent, sure, okay. And to a certain degree, perhaps that everything is non-self, but well, we actually don't understand. We understand intellectually, just like we understand intellectually death. But then as soon as anyone that we care about dies, or if we're in the process of dying, well, our reaction will be a little bit different. We'll be most likely very confused and distressed. So the intellectual understanding, of course, it's useful, but we need to, of course, go further and penetrate it. And in that moment, Venerable Ananda sees that Channa is ready to go further, because basically what had impeded his growth in the path was his arrogance and conceit of thinking he knew just like everyone else, thinking that he knew the Dhamma. But when he actually was able to let go of that conceit, then he was ready for the teaching. And when Venerable Ananda highlights that, he says, you're ready for learning, his mind then becomes elated. It's full of gladness and rapture. That's how it says in the suttas. So beautiful. So both Pīti and Pāmojja in his mind. And he's like, oh, great, me too. I am ready to learn the Dhamma. Yes, I can understand the Dhamma. Please, Venerable Ananda, teach me. And so Venerable Ananda gives him a teaching on emptiness. And so once again, we see how faith in these teachings, or better, whenever we actually practice the way that the Buddha tells us to practice, we nurture faith. And as we nurture faith, then all the rest follows. It's so much easier. And so these are all the things that the conditions that we need to put in place in order for happiness to arise. And since I've been talking a lot tonight, I just want to end with another quote from the Buddha, but in this case on going further, as we were saying, on being ambitious. So of course, making sure that we're cultivating this, this joy in our practice, but also remembering what he said, that there's different types of happiness. And so the Buddha says in Anguttara Nikaya 274, says, monks, there are these two kinds of happiness. What two? The happiness based on the presence of rapture and the happiness based on the absence of rapture. These are the two kinds of happiness. Of these two kinds of happiness, the happiness based on the absence of rapture is foremost. And when do we have the absence of rapture? The third jhana. After the third jhana. So always going further, really putting effort in the path, not being okay with just some sort of nice, even if it's like a little pause. It's great to have little pauses and delighting in that. Whether it's, once again, contemplating the suttas, whether it's also making progress in meditative attainments. But at a certain point, we'll see that we'll start craving also this rapture that comes in formal meditation. And that is always a cause of suffering because it will impede us from going further. It grows, it's there, it's incredible, then it disappears, and then we want it back. We're like, wait, why has it disappeared? Why is it not there anymore? And that impedes us to move forward. So it's good to cultivate the happiness based on rapture, where rapture is present, but also remembering that there is something beyond that. And countless beings have attained that happiness and have gone beyond that until they have attained full, complete liberation. All right, so this is all that comes tonight. So I'll end here, and if you have any questions, feel free to type them in.
So thank you, Ayya Soma, for sharing those words of Dhamma with us. Angela says, without me even asking a question, you've answered so many that I've had as I've deepened my practice over the years. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Very happy to hear.
So far, there are no questions, just a bunch of thank yous and thank you emojis. So if anyone has a question, feel free to type it in. Otherwise, you can have an early night.
Early night is always good.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for all of your attention and interaction, as always. You can join us tomorrow morning for Sutta study at 8 a.m. New York City time, and then for another guided meditation and Dhamma talk at 7:30 p.m. And then on Friday, we'll have Sutta study in the morning, and then monk chat on Friday evening, where you can ask any question you didn't get to ask tonight, or anything related to Buddhist practice, to a panel of 3 of our resident monastics. So thanks again for joining us. We can end tonight with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And enjoy the rest of your night.